There comes a moment in life when everything depends on what's still alive inside you, when nothing around you seems to cooperate. That's where most people break, not because they lack talent, not because they lack dreams, not because they lack ability, but because when pressure rises, their faith begins to fall, and when faith falls, the mind weakens, vision becomes unclear, fear starts to feel like logic, and quitting begins to look like maturity. Napoleon Hill understood something most people never truly grasp. No great achievement is born in the outer world first. It begins as a conviction, as an inner decision, as a belief held long enough that reality is eventually forced to catch up with it. And that's exactly why so many people live far below what they're capable of. Because they desire deeply, they pray sincerely, they speak confidently, but they don't sustain their faith when the environment turns against them. The Bible makes this clear. Faith is not a small part of the journey. It is the foundation. It is what keeps you standing when results haven't shown up yet. It is what prevents doubt from taking control of your mind. It is what pushes you forward even when everything seems still. In today's video, you're going to understand how Napoleon Hill's teachings connect deeply with biblical principles of unshakable faith, persistence, purpose, mental discipline, and strength in the face of adversity. You'll discover why so many people interrupt their own transformation right before the breakthrough, and how to build a mind strong enough to keep going even without applause, even without evidence, even without guarantees. Because there's something you need to understand as soon as possible. It's not always the lack of opportunity that destroys a destiny. Sometimes it's the silent loss of faith. Before we go any further, I want to invite you to do something simple but powerful. If this kind of message resonates with you, if you want to strengthen your mind, your faith, and your vision, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here, we're not just talking about motivation. We're talking about inner transformation, mental renewal, and principles that can truly change the direction of your life. And if at any point in this video, you feel like this message is exactly what you needed to hear, leave a like and comment below. I will remain steady. Now, let's understand why unshakable faith has always been one of the greatest forces behind every major achievement. There is a silent pattern that separates the people who build extraordinary lives from those who spend years trying and never move forward. And that pattern is not found in talent. It is not found in intelligence. It is not found in opportunity. It is found in how a person responds. When results have not shown up yet, most people start with motivation. They set goals, they get excited about the idea of change. They feel like this time will be different. But there is a critical point in the journey, a point that almost no one notices, but that determines everything. It's the moment when effort continues, but results haven't arrived yet, and this is exactly where faith begins to be tested, because as long as there is visible progress, the mind stays confident. But when progress slows down or seems non-existent, doubt begins to creep in, and it doesn't arrive aggressively. It arrives quietly, as thoughts that sound logical. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm aiming too high. Maybe I should stop before I waste more time. And at that point, most people make a silent decision. They don't announce it. They don't explain it. They don't make a big statement. They simply begin to reduce themselves. They reduce their effort. They reduce their intensity. They reduce their commitment until, without realizing it, they walk away from the very thing that could have changed everything. Napoleon Hill observed this pattern over and over again. He studied thousands of successful people and noticed something they all had in common. They were not the fastest. They were not the most intelligent. They were not the ones with the best starting point. But they were the ones who refused to stop when there was no visible evidence of progress. They kept going, even when there was no validation, even when there was no recognition, even when there were no guarantees. And this is not just about discipline. This is about faith, because continuing without seeing results requires something beyond logic. It requires the ability to sustain internally what does not yet exist. externally. And this is exactly what the Bible describes. Faith is not based on what you can see. It is based on what you choose to believe before it becomes visible. That means at some point in your journey, you will have to make a decision. Either you become a prisoner of your circumstances, or you become someone who holds a vision regardless of the environment, and that decision is what determines who builds something meaningful and who keeps starting over again and again. Because the truth is simple. Results are slow in the beginning, invisible in the middle, and obvious in the end. But most people quit. In the invisible stage, and maybe the biggest mistake a person can make is not failure, but interrupting the process before the transformation has time to appear. So if you want to build unshakable faith, you need to stop measuring your progress only by what is visible and start understanding that there is a process happening internally that cannot yet be seen, but is quietly preparing the ground for everything you are trying to build. There is a silent mistake that causes many people to confuse faith with hope, and that confusion is costly, because hope waits, but faith sustains. Hope looks at the future and wishes something will happen, but faith looks at the invisible and decides it has already begun. And this is exactly what the Bible reveals in one of the most powerful definitions ever written. Faith is the assurance of what we hope for the conviction of what we do not see. This changes everything, because it means real faith does not depend on signs, does not depend on confirmation, does not depend on favorable circumstances. It comes first, it is established within, and it remains steady, even when the outer world has not responded yet. Napoleon Hill, even without using these exact words, taught the same principle. He said that everything begins with a burning desire, but desire alone does not have enough power. It must be sustained by a belief so strong that the mind begins to act as if it were already possible. And here is something most people don't understand. Your mind does not respond to what you want, it responds to what you accept as true. If deep down you desire prosperity, but accept scarcity as your reality, your mind will work against you. If you say you want to grow, but internally believe you are not capable, you create conflict, and that conflict weakens your action, weakens your persistence, weakens your consistency. That is why faith is not only something spiritual, it is internal alignment. It is the moment when what you desire, what you believe, and what you repeat begin to move in the same direction. And when that alignment happens, something shifts. You begin to act differently. You begin to decide differently. You begin to endure more, not because circumstances improved, but because you stop depending on them. And that is the turning point, because most people live reacting to what they see. If they see difficulty, they lose motivation. If they see delay, they start to doubt. If they see obstacles, they pull back. But someone with unshakable faith does not react to the environment. They sustain a vision. They don't need to see in order to continue. They continue until they see. And this completely changes how you live, because you stop being unstable, dependent on external signals, and you become steady, building from the inside out. True faith does not eliminate challenges, but it prevents challenges from eliminating you. It does not make the path shorter, but it makes you strong enough to walk it to the end. And that is why so many people start, but so few remain. Because starting requires excitement, but remaining requires faith, and faith is not something you feel only on good days. It is something you choose to sustain, especially on the days when nothing seems to make sense. The mind is a battlefield, and most of the time, you don't even see it. There is a war happening inside you every single day, and the most dangerous part is that most people don't even realize they're in it, because this war is silent. It leaves no visible scars. It doesn't draw attention, but it decides everything. It decides your choices. It decides your actions. It decides how far you move forward, or how far you fall back. This war happens in your mind, between what you want to build and what you've been conditioned to believe, between the vision that could transform your life and the thoughts trying to keep you exactly where you are. Hill made this clear. The human mind is not neutral. It is either directed or it is dominated. And when you don't take control, something else always will: fear, doubt, anxiety, insecurity. These are not just emotions. They are forces. And if you don't learn to recognize them, they begin to influence your decisions. Without you even noticing, you start thinking you're being rational, when in reality, you're being limited. You begin to justify quitting as if it were maturity. You start accepting less as if it were wisdom, and little by little, without realizing it, your life begins to be shaped, not by what you desire, but by what you fear. And that is exactly why the Bible gives a direct and powerful instruction. Do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That means if you don't renew your mind, you automatically conform. You absorb patterns, you absorb limitations, you absorb beliefs you never consciously chose, and then you try to build an extraordinary life. With a mind conditioned for the ordinary, that doesn't work, because your life will always reflect what occupies your mind most of the time. If your mind is filled with doubt, your actions will be unstable. If your mind is filled with fear, your decisions will be small. If your mind is filled with uncertainty, your persistence will be weak. But if your mind is trained, if it is renewed, if it is consciously directed, everything begins to change. And this is where faith becomes strategic, because faith is not just belief. Faith is a tool for mental control. It works as protection, a barrier against thoughts that weaken you, a force that prevents doubt from becoming dominant. When you develop faith, you don't eliminate negative thoughts, but you stop obeying them. You begin to choose what stays in your mind. And that is power, because in the end, your life is not defined by what happens to you. It is defined by how you interpret and respond to what happens. And those who don't master their own mind live reacting. But those who learn to govern their thoughts begin to build. And that is the difference between a life driven by fear and a life driven by faith. There is a mistake that quietly destroys many people's faith. Even when they believe, it is the lack of direction. Because you can have strength, you can have desire, you can even have faith. But if you don't know exactly where you're going, that energy gets scattered. And when energy is scattered, confidence begins to weaken. The mind becomes confused, decisions become inconsistent, and the feeling of being lost starts to grow. That's why so many people say they believe, but remain stuck. It's not because they don't want to move forward. It's because they lack the clarity required to sustain movement. Napoleon Hill was very clear about this. He said that one of the most important principles of success is definiteness of purpose, because when you don't clearly define what you want, your mind has nowhere to go. And a mind without direction is easily dominated by distractions, by doubt, by external opinions. Now, there is something even deeper here. A lack of clarity doesn't just block progress, it weakens faith, because it's difficult to maintain conviction in something you cannot clearly see. And that is exactly why the Bible says, where there is no vision, people lose their way. This is not just about spiritual vision. It is about direction. It is about knowing exactly what you are building, why you are building it, and where it is leading you. When you don't have that clarity, any difficulty feels too big. Any delay feels like something is wrong. Any obstacle feels like a reason to stop. But when clarity exists, everything changes. Difficulty becomes part of the process. Delay becomes just a phase. Obstacles become something to move through, and faith becomes stronger, because now it is not floating. It is connected to a destination, to a defined purpose, to a vision you can hold in your mind, and that creates stability, because you stop depending on motivation, and you start moving based on direction. And there is a huge difference between the two. Motivation is unstable. It comes and goes. It depends on the environment. It depends on emotion. But direction is constant. It does not depend on how you feel. It depends on what you decided. And that is what keeps a person moving, even on difficult days. So if you want to build unshakable faith, you need to stop living vaguely. Stop saying, I want to improve. I want to grow. I want to change my life. And start getting specific. What exactly are you trying to build? What kind of life are you aiming for? What kind of person do you need to become? Because the clearer this becomes, the stronger your mind gets, the more stable your faith becomes, and the more consistent your actions become. And from that point on, you stop being someone who tries, and you become someone who executes. Faith without action collapses. There is a point where belief alone is no longer enough. And this is where many people get stuck, because they think faith is something passive, something you feel, something you declare, something you hope will eventually work out. But real faith moves, it acts, it builds, it persists, even when there is no guarantee. This is why the Bible makes something very clear: faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. That means faith is not proven by what you say. It is revealed by what you do. Napoleon Hill reinforced this in a very practical way. He taught that desire must be followed by organized action, because no matter how strong your vision is, if it does not translate into consistent execution, it will never become reality. And this is where many people create a dangerous illusion. They believe, they visualize, they affirm, but they don't act with the same intensity. They wait for the perfect moment. They wait to feel ready. They wait for more certainty. And while they wait, nothing moves, because faith does not grow in comfort. It grows in movement. It grows when you take action without having full clarity, when you step forward without having full control, when you continue without having full proof. That is where faith becomes real, because now it is no longer just a thought. It becomes behavior. And behavior is what shapes your life. There is something you need to understand. Action is not just a result of faith. It is also what strengthens it. Every time you act in alignment with your vision, you send a signal to your mind that this is real, that this matters, that this is who you are becoming. And the more you repeat that, the stronger your identity becomes. And when identity shifts, consistency follows. But when you hesitate, when you delay, when you avoid, you send the opposite message. And that weakens your faith, because now your actions are contradicting your belief. And when belief and action are not aligned, progress collapses. That is why discipline becomes essential, because discipline is what keeps you moving on the days when motivation is gone, on the days when emotions are unstable, on the days when doubt is loud. Discipline is what protects your vision until your results begin to catch up. So if you truly want to build unshakable faith, you need to stop treating action as optional. You need to stop waiting for certainty and start moving with decision, even if it's imperfect, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's slow, because clarity often comes after movement, not before. And the people who transform their lives are not the ones who wait for the right moment. They are the ones who act and turn movement into momentum. Most people quit right before the breakthrough. There is a phase in every meaningful journey that feels like nothing is happening. No visible progress, no clear signs, no confirmation that you're getting closer. And this is where most people stop. Not at the beginning, not when it's exciting, not when everything is new, but in the middle, in the silent phase. The phase where effort continues, but results don't seem to respond. This is where faith is truly tested, because at the beginning, motivation carries you, but in the middle, only conviction sustains you. Napoleon Hill understood this deeply. He taught that persistence is the dividing line between those who desire and those who achieve, because desire is easy to feel, but persistence requires endurance. It requires the ability to keep going when there is no immediate reward. And that is exactly why so many people never reach their full potential. They misinterpret the process. They assume that because they don't see results, nothing is working. They assume that delay means failure. They assume that resistance means they're on the wrong path. And because of that, they stop right before things begin to shift. The Bible addresses this with a powerful warning. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due time we will reap. If we do not give up, that phrase changes everything. If we do not give up, because the outcome is not only connected to effort, it is connected to endurance. It is connected to your ability to remain when everything in you wants to walk away. There is something important you need to understand. Growth is not always visible. Progress is not always measurable. And transformation is not always immediate. Sometimes, what is happening in your life is not obvious on the surface, but it is being built underneath, like roots growing before the tree appears, like structure forming before. Anything becomes visible, and if you interrupt that process, you lose everything that was developing in silence. That is why patience is not weakness. It is strength under control. It is the decision to continue without needing constant proof. And this is where unshakable faith is formed, not when everything is working, but when nothing seems to be changing, and you still refuse to stop. Because at some point, the invisible becomes visible. The effort begins to show, the results begin to emerge, the process begins to make sense. But only for those who stayed, only for those who endured, only for those who didn't walk away. And that is the difference between those who live in cycles of starting over and those who eventually break through. They reach the same point. They faced the same silence. They felt the same doubt, but one group stopped and the other continued. So if you feel like nothing is happening, if you feel like your effort is not being rewarded, if you feel like you're stuck in the middle, understand this: you may not be far. You may be closer than you think, and this might not be the moment to question your path. This might be the moment to strengthen your faith and refuse to quit. Fear is the silent enemy of faith. There is something quietly working against you. Even when you don't notice it, it doesn't shout, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't always feel dangerous, but it shapes your decisions. It limits your actions, and if left unchecked, it can control the direction of your entire life. That force is fear. Napoleon Hill identified fear as one of the most destructive influences on the human mind, not because it is loud, but because it is subtle. It disguises itself as logic, as caution, as realism, as being responsible. But underneath, it is restriction, it is hesitation, it is the quiet voice that tells you to stay where you are, even when you know you're meant for more. Fear doesn't need to stop you completely. It only needs to slow you down, to make you doubt, to make you delay, to make you question your own potential. And over time, that hesitation compounds opportunities. Our missed decisions, our postponed growth is interrupted, and slowly your life begins to shrink, not because you lacked ability, but because you listened to fear more than you trusted your vision. The Bible speaks directly to this. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. That means fear is not your natural state. It is something that enters, something that tries to influence, something that must be recognized and resisted, because fear and faith cannot dominate your mind at the same time. One will always overpower the other. If fear grows, faith weakens. If faith grows, fear loses its control. And this is where awareness becomes critical, because most people don't realize that they are making decisions based on fear. They think they are being careful, but they are actually holding themselves back. They think they are protecting themselves, but they are actually limiting their expansion. They think they are waiting for the right moment, but they are actually avoiding discomfort, and avoidance is one of the strongest forms of fear. That is why unshakable faith requires courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision to move, despite it, to act, even when uncertainty is present, to continue, even when doubt tries to interfere, because courage is not something you wait for. It is something you practice. Every time you choose action over hesitation, every time you choose belief over doubt, every time you choose growth over comfort, you weaken fear, and you strengthen faith, and over time, that changes everything. Because the same mind that once held you back becomes the mind that moves you forward. So if you want to build a life that is bigger than your current reality. You will have to confront fear, not once, but repeatedly, and each time you do, you reclaim control. You reinforce your vision, and you step further into the person you are meant to become. Because in the end, your life will not be defined by the opportunities you had, but by the fears you refused to obey. Your words are programming your future. There is something you use every single day, without realizing the level of power it carries, your words. Not just what you say out loud, but what you repeat internally. The conversations you have with yourself, the phrases you allow to circulate. In your mind, the way you describe your reality. All of this is shaping your future. Napoleon Hill emphasized this. Through the principle of autosuggestion, he explained that the mind absorbs what is repeated with emotion, not what you say once, but what you say consistently. Because repetition creates belief, and belief drives behavior, and behavior creates results. That means your life is not just being shaped by your actions. It is being shaped by what you are telling yourself every day. And this is where many people sabotage their own progress. Without noticing, they say they want to grow, but constantly repeat thoughts like, I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. This is too hard. Maybe this won't work. And even if those thoughts seem harmless, they are being recorded. They are being reinforced. And over time, they become your internal truth. And once something becomes your internal truth, your mind begins to act in alignment with it. This is exactly why the Bible says death and life are in the power of the tongue, because words are not neutral. They either build or they break. They either strengthen or they weaken. They either align you with your vision or pull you away from it. And the most dangerous words are not the ones spoken by others. They are the ones you repeat to yourself, because those are the ones your mind believes without resistance. That is why faith must be verbalized, not as empty repetition, but as intentional reinforcement. You must begin to speak in alignment with what you are building, even before it becomes visible, even before it feels natural, even before there is proof. Because the goal is not to describe your current reality. The goal is to train your mind to accept a new one. And at first, it may feel uncomfortable, it may feel forced, it may even feel unrealistic, but that is because your mind is not used to it yet. And this is where consistency becomes essential. Because the same way, negative repetition creates limitation, intentional repetition creates expansion. The more you reinforce a new belief, the more familiar it becomes. The more familiar it becomes, the more natural it feels, and eventually, what once felt impossible starts to feel expected. And when expectation changes, your behavior follows. And when behavior changes, your results begin to shift. So if you want to build unshakable faith, you need to take control of your internal dialogue. You need to become aware of what you are reinforcing. You need to stop feeding thoughts that weaken you and start repeating thoughts that strengthen your vision. Because in the end, your words are not just describing your life, they are directing it. Failure is not the end. IT is the test of your faith. There is a moment that breaks most people. Not the beginning, not the effort, not even the difficulty, but the moment when they fail, when something doesn't work, when a plan falls apart, when the result they expected doesn't come. That's where many people make a decision, a dangerous one. They start to believe that the failure defines them. They don't just say, this didn't work. They begin to think, maybe I'm not capable. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should stop trying. And that shift changes everything. Because the moment failure becomes identity, progress stops. Napoleon Hill was very clear about this. Every adversity, every failure, every setback carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. But here's the problem. Most people never stay long enough to find that seed. They experience the pain, but they don't extract the lesson. They face the resistance, but they don't transform through it. They fall, and instead of rising stronger, they step back. And this is where faith becomes essential, because failure will challenge your belief. It will confront your confidence. It will test your patience. It will expose your doubts. And if your faith is weak, you will interpret failure as a final answer. But if your faith is strong, you will interpret it as a phase, as feedback, as redirection, as preparation. The Bible expresses this with powerful clarity. Do not rejoice over me, my enemy, though I have fallen, I will rise. That is a mindset of someone who refuses to be defined by a moment. Someone who understands that falling is not the end, staying down is. And this is the difference between people who transform their lives and those who remain stuck. They both fail. They both face difficulty. They both experience moments of doubt. But one group stops and the other rises again, stronger, wiser, more aware. There is something you need to accept. Failure is not optional. If you are trying to grow, if you are trying to build something meaningful, if you are stepping into something bigger, you will face setbacks. You will face resistance. You will face moments where things don't go as planned. But those moments are not there to stop you. They are there to shape you, to refine your thinking, to strengthen your endurance, to deepen your faith. Because every time you rise again, you prove something to yourself. You prove that you are not controlled by circumstances. You prove that your vision is stronger than your setbacks. You prove that your faith is not fragile, and over time that changes your identity. You stop being someone who fears failure and become someone who expects growth from it. So if you have fallen, if something didn't work, if you feel like you've taken a step back, don't misinterpret the moment. This is not the end of your path. This is part of your construction. And what matters now is not what happened, but what you decide to do next. Because the people who win in the long run are not the ones who never fail. They are the ones who never allow failure to have the final word. Your environment is either building your faith or destroying it. There is something influencing your thoughts every single day. Even when you don't notice it, your environment, the people you listen to, the conversations you engage, in the content you consume, the atmosphere you stay in, all of it is shaping your mindset. And over time, it is either strengthening your faith or slowly weakening it. Most people underestimate this. They believe their results are only a product of their effort. But effort alone is not enough, because your environment is constantly feeding your mind. And whatever feeds your mind repeatedly becomes your reality. Napoleon Hill spoke about this through the concept of influence. He understood that the human mind is highly receptive. It absorbs attitudes. It absorbs beliefs. It absorbs emotional patterns, especially from those who are closest to you. That means if you are surrounded by doubt, you will begin to doubt. If you are surrounded by fear, you will begin to hesitate. If you are surrounded by limitation, you will begin to shrink your own vision. And this doesn't happen suddenly. It happens gradually, through repetition, through exposure, through normalization, until one day you are thinking in ways that you never consciously chose. And that is dangerous, because now your environment is shaping your identity without your permission. This is exactly why the Bible warns. Bad company corrupts good character, not because people are necessarily bad, but because influence is powerful, and influence is constant. You don't need to agree with everything around you. You just need to be exposed to it long enough, and it begins to affect you. That is why protecting your mind is not optional. It is necessary. If you want to build unshakable faith, you must become intentional about what you allow into your environment. You need to evaluate, who are you listening to? What are you watching daily? What kind of conversations are you participating in? Because if your environment is filled with negativity, your faith will constantly be under attack. But when your environment supports your growth, everything changes. You begin to think differently. You begin to believe differently. You begin to act differently. Not because you forced yourself, but because your surroundings are reinforcing your direction. And sometimes protecting your faith requires difficult decisions. It may require distance. It may require silence. It may require stepping away from certain influences, not out of rejection, but out of preservation. Because not everyone around you is aligned with where you are going. And if you don't recognize that you may allow the wrong voices to weaken the right vision. So if you are serious about building a stronger life, you need to build a stronger environment. Feed your mind with what elevates you. Surround yourself with what challenges you to grow. Limit exposure to what drains your energy, and be intentional about what you normalize. Because in the end, you don't just rise because of what you do. You rise because of what you consistently allow. To shape your mind, discipline is what sustains your faith daily. There is something most people overlook. They think faith is built in powerful moments, in emotional experiences, in inspiration, in moments of clarity. But that's not where real faith is sustained. Faith is sustained in daily discipline, in what you do repeatedly, in what you expose your mind to, in how you train your thoughts every single day. Because without discipline, even strong faith fades. Napoleon Hill emphasized this through repetition and mental conditioning. He understood that the mind must be trained, not occasionally, but consistently, because the mind does not stay still. It is either being strengthened or being weakened every day. And if you are not intentionally feeding your mind, it will be shaped by whatever surrounds you. That is why discipline is not restriction. It is protection. It protects your focus. It protects your vision. It protects your faith. The Bible expresses this with powerful clarity. Meditate on it day and night. That instruction is not about religion. It is about consistency. It is about keeping your mind aligned. Not once in a while, but continuously, because what you repeat daily becomes your internal reality, and your internal reality eventually becomes your external life. This is why your routine matters, more than motivation, more than inspiration, more than temporary excitement. Your routine determines your direction. So if you want to build unshakable faith, you need to create daily structure moments where you intentionally reset your mind, where you disconnect from noise and reconnect with your vision. This can look simple, but powerful, taking a few minutes every day to focus, to reflect, to realign. Repeating what you are building, reaffirming what you believe, visualizing where you are going. Not as a ritual without meaning, but as a conscious act of training your mind. Because every time you do this, you strengthen your internal foundation. And when your foundation is strong, external pressure has less power over you. That is why disciplined people are more stable, not because they have fewer problems, but because they are less affected by them. They don't depend on how they feel. They depend on what they have trained themselves to do. And over time, this creates something powerful: consistency, and consistency builds momentum. And momentum changes everything, because once you are in motion, it becomes easier to stay in motion. Once your mind is aligned, it becomes easier to stay aligned. Once your faith is reinforced daily, it becomes harder to break. So if you feel unstable, if you feel inconsistent, if you feel like your faith goes up and down, the answer is not more intensity. It is more structure, more repetition, more intention, more discipline. Because faith is not something you build once. It is something you maintain every single day. And the people who create lasting transformation are not the ones who feel the most. They are the ones who train the most. CIT. Before you touch IT, there is a stage in every creation that exists before anything becomes real. It is invisible. It cannot be measured. It cannot be proven. But it is where everything begins. In your mind, Napoleon Hill placed enormous emphasis on this. He taught that imagination is not just creativity. It is a tool, a mechanism, through which ideas are formed, refined, and prepared before they enter reality. And the people who understand this don't wait to see results to believe. They train themselves to see results before they happen. The Bible reinforces this in a powerful way. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and It will be yours. That statement is not about pretending. It is about internal conviction. It is about reaching a level of belief where the absence of physical proof does not weaken your certainty, because you have already accepted it internally. This is where most people struggle. They try to visualize, but they don't truly believe. They imagine for a moment, but then return to doubt. They see the possibility, but immediately question it. And that inconsistency weakens the process, because the mind responds to what is dominant, not what is occasional. If doubt is stronger than belief, doubt will shape your behavior. But if conviction becomes dominant, everything begins to align. Your actions change, your decisions change, your persistence increases, because now you are not chasing something uncertain. You are moving towards something you have already accepted, and that changes your energy. It changes how you show up. It changes how you respond. It changes how you endure. This is why visualization must be intentional, not vague, not passive, not occasional. You must clearly see what you are building, who you are, becoming what your life is moving toward, and you must return to that vision repeatedly until it becomes familiar, until it feels real, until your mind stops questioning it and starts expecting it, because expectation is powerful. When your mind expects something, it begins to act in alignment with it. It looks for opportunities. It takes initiative. It sustains effort, even in uncertainty. And this is where faith and imagination merge. Faith sustains the belief, imagination gives it form. And together, they create a powerful internal reality that eventually begins to express itself externally. So if you want to build something greater than your current reality, you must learn to see beyond what is visible. You must train your mind to hold an image that your environment has not yet confirmed, because everything you will one day hold in your hands must first become strong. In your mind, faith in the middle of chaos, there will be moments in your life when everything feels unstable, moments where plans fall apart, where certainty disappears, where what once felt clear becomes confusing. And in those moments, faith is no longer a concept. It becomes a necessity. Because it is easy to believe when things are working. It is easy to stay confident when progress is visible. But when everything seems uncertain, when the outcome is unclear, when the pressure increases, that is when your faith is truly revealed. Most people think faith means feeling strong. But real faith is not about feeling. It is about standing when your emotions are unstable, standing when your thoughts are noisy, standing when your environment is unpredictable. Napoleon Hill spoke about emotional control as a critical factor, because if you allow external conditions to control your internal state, you will become inconsistent. And inconsistency destroys progress. One day you move forward, the next day you hesitate, the next day you stop. Not because your goal changed, but because your state changed. And this is where most people lose control. They allow temporary circumstances to redefine permanent decisions. They let a bad moment become a bad direction. They let pressure become paralysis. But the Bible brings a powerful reminder. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. It is not just comfort. That is instruction. It is a call to remain steady, even when everything around you is shaking, because stability is not found in the environment. It is built within, and the stronger your inner foundation is, the less external chaos can affect you. That is why faith in difficult times is more valuable than faith in easy times, because it is in difficulty that your identity is formed. It is in pressure that your strength is revealed. It is in uncertainty that your conviction is tested. And if you can remain grounded, if you can stay focused, if you can keep moving forward, even when things are unclear, you develop something rare. Resilience, and resilience creates endurance, and endurance creates results. Because most people don't fail because they lack potential. They fail because they collapse under pressure. But those who learn to stand, those who learn to stabilize their mind, those who learn to protect their faith, become extremely difficult to stop. So when life feels chaotic, when things don't make sense, when you feel the pressure rising, don't see it as a signal to retreat. See it as a moment to reinforce. Reinforce your belief. Reinforce your direction. Reinforce your identity. Because if you can remain steady in the middle of instability, you are already becoming the kind of person who cannot be broken by circumstances. Faith, desire, and persistence. The formula that creates results at this point. Everything begins to connect, because what you've seen so far is not separate. It is a system, a structure, a sequence that determines whether something remains an idea or becomes reality. Napoleon Hill made this very clear. Every achievement begins with a burning desire, but desire alone is unstable. It can fade, it can weaken, it can disappear under pressure. That is why desire must be sustained by faith, because faith gives stability. It keeps the desire alive. Even when results are not visible, even when the environment is uncertain, even when the process feels slow, but even that is not enough, because faith without movement eventually stagnates. That is where persistence enters. Persistence is what translates belief into reality. It is what carries you through the invisible stage, through the resistance, through the uncertainty, until results begin to appear. And this is where most people break the sequence they desire. But they don't sustain faith, or they believe, but they don't persist, or they act, but they stop too soon, and when the sequence is broken, results never fully materialize, because this formula only works when all three are aligned. Desire gives direction, faith gives strength, persistence gives continuity. And when these three operate together, something powerful happens. You become consistent, not occasionally, not emotionally, but structurally. Your actions stop depending on how you feel and start depending on what you decided. Your mindset stops reacting to circumstances and starts shaping them. Your identity begins to shift from someone who hopes to someone who builds. And this is where transformation becomes inevitable. Because once your internal system is aligned, external results become a matter of time. Not luck, not coincidence, not chance time. That is why the Bible consistently reinforces perseverance. Because the outcome is not just for those who start. It is for those who remain, those who continue, those who endure, those who refuse to break the sequence. And this is the level most people never reach, because it requires something rare. It requires emotional control, mental discipline, spiritual stability. It requires the ability to keep moving without immediate reward, without constant validation, without external confirmation. And that is exactly what makes it powerful, because once you reach that level, you are no longer easily stopped. You are no longer dependent on conditions. You are no longer controlled by doubt. You become anchored, grounded, focused, and from that position progress becomes inevitable. So if there is one thing you need to take from this, it is this: do not break the sequence. Do not allow doubt to weaken your faith. Do not allow delay to weaken your persistence. Do not allow fear to weaken your desire. Because the moment you keep all three aligned, you move from trying to becoming unstoppable. At some point, this stops being about what you know and becomes about what you choose. You've seen the principles. You understand the path. Now the question is simple. Will you remain? Or will you retreat? Because unshakable faith is not something you wait for. It is something you decide. And from this moment forward, every thought you allow, every action you take, every time you refuse to quit, is building the life you say you want. Don't leave this as just another video. Make it a decision. If this message spoke to you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I will remain steady. And remember, the ones who win are not the ones who never struggle. They are the ones who never stop.